IT leadership at RIT. I came from the public or industry, private industry, to RIT a couple of years ago, and one of the areas that has always been a passion of mine is leadership development. I have been the product of many people mentoring my leadership skills and encouraging those from the time I was a small child, because I believe our leadership journey begins at home. I was one of 5 children, the oldest sister. You can just imagine where that all went. And one of the things that was very interesting to me when I went to RIT, I was surprised to find out there wasn't a leadership program, not just for IT, but across campus. Although there was a leadership institute, and they had a brochure, so I kind of hustled over to the student union and thought I'm going to go in there and ask for some leadership development training for my managers. And it's one full-time professional staff member and 2 grad students who do leadership development for our students, but not for our staff. So I'm going to share with you the journey that we took at RIT, how to fill that void, and why we did what we did. And I'm going to share with you some of the tools, and I'll pass a few things around. These are all samples. There won't be an exam of any sort. But, and then as we go along, feel free as we chat to raise your hand if you've got a question or interrupt, because I'll be happy to talk through those things as we get to them. So if you were to close your eyes and think about this statement, what would you do? What would you attempt if you knew you could not fail? And when I think about that, I really think about CIOs. We have tremendous responsibilities, tremendous opportunities, and our work in the industry we're in moves at lightning speed. Google Plus got 10 million users in 13 days. How do you even keep up? What would you do if you knew you could not fail? And how do you have the bravery and the courage to do that, to move forward on whatever that initiative is? And what I suggest to you is the way you do that is through people. And what each one of us could do if we knew we could not fail would be through our managers and our staffs, the IT leadership that work with us. Now, this is my disclaimer slide when I heard they were filming this. I am not an expert. This is purely my opinion based on my thoughts and my experiences. So it always starts with the question, are leaders born or are they made? What do you think? Yes, it's good. Perfect answer. It is both. Your journey does usually begin early on in your life. And if you weren't as fortunate as I was to be born into a family where that was culled and celebrated, you still could make up those experiences as you went along in your first job, perhaps with a teacher, with a mentor. And all of us are on a journey of leadership. You're never done. I had someone at RIT ask me, well, when will we finish this book? Like, when will we be done with this? And I said, it's actually like a big book with a lot of chapters. It'll never end. And for me, I've been working on my leadership skills for a long time. I probably should be better if you think about all the years I've been working on them. But this is a long-term journey. And I think it's something that is important to decide in your mind if leaders can be made and developed, because you have a lot of folks around you that are depending on you, helping them develop their leadership skills. How many institutions have a leadership development program that's formal, either for just your IT staff or for all of your administrative staff on campus? 3 people. Are those 3 different institutions? What are your institutions? Villanova, Adelphi, and RPI. So 3 other resources, but it is, for the most part, as an industry, woefully inadequate. Research has shown that it's less than 40% of higher ed institutions that have any type of formal program. One of the things that's really important in this is to understand that leadership is action and not position. And as we go through this, I'm going to use the word leader and I'm going to use the word manager sometimes interchangeably. And I'll explain to you why I'm doing that in my own organization, but I believe leadership is a position of action and not your position. You do not have to be in charge formally to be an effective leader. In fact, many of us have people in our organizations that are outstanding leaders that are not managers or supervisors. We also have negative leaders in our organization that can influence people as well. They're just using their leadership skills for evil, not good. When I was in high school, I was class president for 4 years, and this is 1977. We wanted to be able to smoke in the commons. And I decided, because I thought I was a smoker at the time, that I would lead the charge for that, and we were going to not go to our classes for 2 hours until our high school said we could smoke in the commons. My daughter is horrified when she hears this story. So we did that, and we actually kind of won the right to smoke cigarettes in a certain area of this commons. And when I went to college, graduating in 77 into 78, I went to a state school in New Jersey, and it was in my file that I couldn't join any student organizations for 1 year. And I said, what are you talking about? I've always been involved. And as it turned out, they had the dean of our college, I was a history major, said, well, you had some negative behavior. And keep in mind, this is the 70s, and colleges were still a bit stinging from, negative student uprisings. And I was viewed as a potential troublemaker. So they said, you can't join any student organizations for a year. You got to be, front and center, good. We want to know your whereabouts, what you're doing. I couldn't even be on the food service committee, which nobody wanted to be on. So I learned early on to be careful about your potentially negative leadership. Since then, I've tried to use those skills for good, not evil. IT leadership is hard. I think it's harder than general leadership. And I think there's many reasons in general. I think IT leaders are critical thinkers, which means most of our leadership tend to think about what's wrong because they're critical thinkers. A couple of weeks ago, I had a picture of my daughter in a frame in my office, and every technologist who walked in, it was the first thing they noticed. Your picture's hanging. The critical thinkers all looked over and saw the picture was askew. They didn't notice my beautiful new artwork in my office, but they noticed that. And I think generally speaking, IT people are trained to diagnose what's wrong, so they sometimes can come across negatively. There's often a lack of soft skills. I was very pleased to hear the presentation yesterday about how they were developing leadership skills in our students here at Marist. Because at the end of the day, you have to understand the technology in IT. You have to have that engineering and diagnostic skills. But there's very little work today that is not accomplished through working with others, and the soft skills are sometimes overlooked and potentially undervalued. I think there's a little bit of a lack of self-awareness sometimes in IT folks. I think that there are times we're not as aware of our skill sets or our styles, and we're even less aware of others. Because we tend to be very cerebral and think about what it is we're working on, what we're doing, and all that other stuff moves into the background a little bit more than in other industries. And then last but not least, most of our technologists are really passionate, almost to an extreme of crazy about certain types of technology, and they want to fight it to the bitter end, and you're stupid, and if you only knew, how could you like Windows or Microsoft, or I love Apple, and the fight is, there's certain meetings you just know you're going to go into, and they're already ready to kind of go at it. So you add all of that together, IT leadership is harder to develop. And we're all trying to lead that type of change in very changing and very challenging times. We have to do more with less. Okay, the technology is changing constantly. So are even the computing models are continually changing. We're all under economic pressure. IT in higher ed is fairly decentralized, so it's a little bit easier, a little bit more difficult to galvanize your resources and sometimes make a business case for this type of development. There's often decentralized procurement practices in higher ed, which leads to a lot of technology angst and confusion and overbuy and gap. We have a very highly demanding user base. In corporate America, your user base doesn't change all that much, hopefully. You lose a few clients, you gain a few clients. In higher ed, every year, your incoming students are demanding something that they are accustomed to in the consumer world. So a couple of years ago when RIT fixed the web front end of the 30-year-old student registration system, the seniors thought that was the best thing since baked bread. The freshmen were like, so what, this stinks, it's still ugly. And every year there's a new freshman group, and every year they come in with tools and technology that they've used at home or in their high schools, and they're looking at you saying, what's wrong with you? And do that times 10 at RIT, where we have technology in our name. I wish I had $1.50 for every time someone said, let's put the T back in RIT. Because every class coming in is very unhappy with that. So notice I said $1.50 because economic pressure, a nickel doesn't cut it anymore. The IT blame game is prevalent I think in higher ed. In many institutions, IT has not moved completely into the role of where the value is seen as a partnership in moving the institution forward. So it's kind of easy to say that crappy system. That system deletes student records with students who've been immunized, and it's doing it erroneously. Well, the application's doing what the application was set to do. Your processes are all broken. So, you have the IT blame game that's pretty prevalent in higher ed. It's tougher to align with the business because the business here is very decentralized. It's not uncommon to have 12 admission offices, multiple support teams, and that's very difficult to manage. And then add on top of this, and we were having a lively conversation at our breakfast table this morning on managing millennials. The Generation Y talent is different. They have different expectations. I'm a baby boomer leader. That's kind of how I was trained, and that's what I kind of like. And I now have people in my organization that are not from my generation. We've had different things shape our expectations, and they have different needs, different work needs, how they want to be managed, how they approach work, how they want to be trained, how they want to be evaluated. So you put this all into the landscape of the jobs we all do, all the research to me points is that we are dramatically underpaid. That's a lot. And IT doesn't just need new leaders, and there's a lot of great articles out about that today. IT needs adaptive leaders. And it isn't about just being a better leader and a better communicator. It's about being almost a cultural traveler and being able to, in IT, not only speak the IT business, but reach across the various industries or the various groups in your institution and understand their business, their pain points, and learn how to speak that common language. And that can be very, very difficult. And adaptive leadership speaks to behavioral changes. It's not just skills. And I want to emphasize the word behavior because you're going to see the tools that we picked out at RIT very much focus on behavior, which we thought was consistent with how IT people would respond. So, why did we decide to do this at RIT? 4 years ago, I was visiting colleges with my daughter. And I had started in higher ed 28 years ago in student affairs. Straight out of grad school, I worked for SU. Then I moved to Rochester and couldn't find a job in higher ed and ended up taking the corporate path and was there at the time. I'd spent about 17 years in a corporate environment, 15 or 12 in IT. And I was visiting colleges with my daughter, and I loved every college. We went to Villanova, we were at BC, I loved every college. And she said to me, because she was trying to decide what kind of a campus, and I was like, oh, I love this, I love that. She said, you love every campus. I said, yes, you ought to get a job, and I'll go back to college. And I was sitting at Boston College in this beautiful admissions, leather chair, and amphitheater, and people bringing me water. It was kind of like being at Marist. And I said to the gentleman next to me, could you imagine working here? The IT people had on spiffy little shirts and chinos, and I was coming from a corporate treadmill rat race. And the guy was a recruiter, and he said, well, what do you do? I said, IT. And he said, oh, I happen to be an IT recruiter. And next thing you know, I started to look to maybe transition back to higher ed in an IT environment. And I was told about a position at RIT, and I thought, oh, RIT, they're probably this well-oiled, highly technical research computing. I don't have any interest. But then they said to me, actually, the group has been sort of left alone for a couple of years. They've been leaderless. They've had interim CIOs who were non-IT folks. And the place is actually kind of a mess. And I said, now you're piquing my interest. So when I looked at the position, it had been a leaderless group for a couple of years. And what that did was any organization can survive the lack of a leader for 3 months or 6 months, maybe even a year, but not 3 or 4 years. And what happened is factions started to develop within the organization. And small groups started to kind of act as almost mini IT organizations in order to be self-sufficient, and actually, in many instances, in order to survive. RIT had a ton of aging technology. We had a 30-year-old legacy mainframe SIS system, 200-300 wireless access points on campus, very decentralized technology, very decentralized around our web. So there was a lot of interest in perhaps starting to polish the technology and move that forward. My organization, we were known as the black hole of requests. So if you had an IT request, if you talked to somebody in IT and you'd say, blah, 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 I want to do this with my website, and they said, oh yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, you can do that, that'll work. They thought the project had started. And really, they were chit-chatting with people in IT because we didn't have any process really to accept work in. There was about 17 points of entry, which pretty much meant you could chat with whoever you wanted, and if that person could do the work for you, they would. But if they were dependent on other people in IT, the work couldn't get done because there wasn't a process and there wasn't an expectation around the unification across those areas. It was very fragmented. There was a lot of internal discord, a lot of fighting, a lot of posturing. We were pretty much disliked by other people. People would say to me, I spent my first few months, meeting with people, your people really suck. They're nice, but they suck. And it turned out our people didn't suck. Our people were actually really good. The problem was with the leadership. Someone said to me, you're going to have to turn over half your staff. We had over 100 people. But I quickly found out that that was not the case. We had talented and engaged employees when it actually, in some instances, those employees shouldn't have stayed as engaged as long as they did. And there was a lot of role confusion. So my first 90 days, I spent asking people, what do you think? How are things going? I spent that time with our employees, with our managers, and with our business partners across campus, and that's kind of the output of what I heard from people. So my session today is going to focus around the track or the roadmap that we took. It's going to be more, here's exactly what we did. I have a couple of things. I have some samples I'm going to pass around so you can take a look at them. There's only one handout. I only brought a handful of those. You can always get the presentation online. There's a little bit more information in there. But this is basically the journey that we took. The first is first of all, it was great to be new, and it's easy to be new. So if you've been the CIO or an active IT member at your organization for more than a couple of years, I encourage you to try to figure out a way to walk in with new eyes. And a lot of that is about asking questions and talking to people and realizing a complaint is a gift. A complaint isn't anything you want to avoid, because what I quickly found out is the complaints, there was a great trend. The good thing was people complained about the same thing. There's a lot of role confusion, people stink, you don't have a way to get work in there, it's a black hole, that type of thing. So a complaint is a gift, and if you can view your interactions, particularly with your business partner and your IT people in that manner, you'll get a lot of valuable information. There's a great book out called A Complaint is a Gift. Every once in a while when you kind of get burdened down with the complaint, I have a little note on my PC so when someone calls me to complain, I don't get that hair on my neck going up. I keep saying, a complaint is a gift, and I am a rich woman, type of. But you want to find the trending complaints and report out your findings for confirmation. At the end of about 100 days, I sat down with my managers and said, this is what I'm hearing. You tell me. And then we did that with our entire IT organization. This is what I'm hearing. You tell me. Am I missing something? Am I connecting the dots erroneously? And then you have to create a plan. You need a roadmap. If you don't have a plan, it's not going to happen. Okay? A goal without a plan is just a wish. So if you think you are developing leadership and you do not have a plan of some sort, and it could be as involved as you want or as simple as you want, if you don't have something written down somewhere that these are the 1, 2, 3 things that I'm going to do and implement with my team, then really all you're doing is wishing. And I wish you luck on that. And the last point of consider your managers, meaning I could look at this problem set in my organization, and the answer to that was through my managers. They manage the resources, they have a hand in the strategy. That's where you will change your organization. That's where you will infuse in your organization the life that you need and the energy that you need to be successful business partners and to align with your institution. It's through that team. It's the analogy of the air mask. Sometimes I say gas mask, so I have to be careful. The air mask that you put on the manager so that they can then sustain the employees. I was somewhere where I said gas mask, and when I saw that come back, I said, that's pretty bad. So why start with your leaders? They own the work, they own the people, and they're often not trained. July 10th in the Chronicle, front page, great article, colleges should cultivate leaders within their own ranks. Think in your own institutions in the last year of any administrative or senior manager positions that have been hired. Were they internal or external hires? This article suggests it was an external hire because we aren't cultivating leadership. I myself don't like that term, aging CIOs, but with an aging workforce, how are we replacing the ranks of the people who work in our organization? Succession planning has a black eye in higher ed. People don't like that term. Industry utilizes succession planning to ensure it has a regular infusion of internal talent with a plan to also how to mix in external talent to create that optimal, hopefully optimal environment. So this is a great article, was July 10th, just a couple of days ago. It's important for your leaders or your managers to understand, is their job to lead, manage, or both? Do they have the necessary skills or competencies to do that? More than likely, they weren't trained. Often a great network administrator becomes a network manager. How do they view their job? Is it to manage the network or to lead their people? Or both? Do you have any expectation for them to have these competencies, these management skills? Is there any required experiences or training that they should have? What do you think about today? What do you expect from your leadership? And do they know it? Because if I'm expecting Jennifer to have certain leadership competencies, and I haven't said this is my expectation that you have that competency, and here's a way to get that competency, and here's what success in that competency looks like, then it's my fault. Because remember, without a plan, a goal is just a wish. And I might wish she would be that way, and I think, why isn't she that way? But you're part of that formula. And it often starts with the expectation. I feel like I'm making wind noise on this thing. Is this all right? Is it too noisy? Okay. So the journey for us really began with 3 questions. And for us, this has been a 3-year journey that will continue. So I'm going to motor through a bunch of things we did, but don't think we did them all in the first few months. Okay, this has taken us about 3 years. And you'll see I'll end with kind of what we finished and what's kind of next. So we did start with bringing all the managers together. There was only about 22, 23 managers in IT. Bring them all together to talk about this topic. And one of them said to me, I've been here 3.5, almost 4 years. This is the first time I'm in a room with all the managers. And these are all Rochester, 3 buildings type of a scenario. So we did a session where we highlighted and brainstormed what are all the attributes of a manager, and we listed those. And then we did another sheet about what are the attributes of a leader. And we got different types of answers. So for managers, they gave things, they give out work. They manage people. They make sure people are here on time. They keep the lid on the place. And those came from our actual brainstorming. Whereas leaders inspire you. They coach you to greatness. They mentor you. They're influential. You want to follow them. So we found there were very different descriptions. Now we need our managers to manage work, but we also want our managers to lead. So at RIT, the expectation was all of our ITS managers also needed to be leaders. Now you may not have that expectation of your folks, but I did. And that area that overlaps are the areas where we need them to do both, because there are some overlap. But we went through that exercise to differentiate that for them. Now, you can find tons of research. There's Kouzes and Posner does this big, there's like 80 attributes, and they give it to hundreds of thousands of people, and you rank them. And I just picked here the top 5, because these are the top 5. And in what order would you put those? Which would you put first, second? Any takers on first? Inspiring. Okay. Honesty. And this has been given out hundreds of thousands of times. And when we did this with our staff, and if you do this list with your staff, I have a handout up here if somebody wants it. My staff did identify those as the top 5, although they had also in their collaboration. One of them didn't make it. I think competence maybe didn't make it, or intelligence. I think competence made it, intelligence did not. My group kept putting collaboration back in there, and I think that was because it was so sorely missing for them that it was right here, that it was so important to them. But these are the statistics around that any organization you go to, people want honesty. They want a leader who's forward-looking. They want somebody who's inspiring, who can be competent, and who's intelligent. And then there's another 25 or so on the list. So important to think about, and an interesting exercise to do with your staff. So I keep saying competency or characteristic, attributes, you'll hear different things. It's really, what do you expect? And I like the word competency because the Wikipedia definition that it's a standardized requirement to properly perform a specific job. But it encompasses, and this is the part I loved, a combo of knowledge, skills, and behavior. It's how you do the work, not just what you do. This kind of talks to how competent someone is in a particular area, and it's not just their skills, but it's the contextual knowledge as well as their behavior. So for our sake of our discussion, we use competency, but I've seen attributes, characteristics used as well. So which key competencies should ITS consider? So I started them with a list of 20. There's a million. Now, I will say it was a guided discussion. There was a couple in there. I feel like this is, how's that? Is that better? No. She was going to say something. It was a guided discussion in the sense that there was a couple that I felt were really important for the organization. So I made sure the 1 or 2 that I was really feeling strongly about were in that list of 20, and I didn't want to overwhelm people with too many. And we had a discussion that I was looking for their input, but not necessarily their decision on it. Because I really felt at that point that there was a couple of things that I really wanted to ensure that we put into place for the group. We went through this exercise with the desired outcome of about 10 or less, that we didn't want to overwhelm the management staff. And we used a book called FYI. I'm going to pass this book around. I want to make sure I get this back, though. These are expensive. This is a fabulous tool. They're about $75 to $125. You can buy them on the internet used, and this is edition 4, but edition 3 is just as good. And what this book does is it takes about 180 competencies, and it defines each one on 2 or 3 pages. So it'll take a competency like collaboration, and it'll tell you, here's 10 bullet points of what highly collaborative people do well. This is what that behavior looks like, which IT people like behavior stuff because it's something they can observe. It tells you how a person who is underusing collaboration and people who are overusing collaboration. And then it gives you a page and a half of, here's some things you can do to develop that skill to be skilled. These are fabulous books. I'm going to pass it around so you could take a look at those. And we use that as a means to pull them out from here. Can I walk over here? Just pass this one around this way. So those competencies were from there, and what I also felt was strongly about that is we issued those books to our managers. Recently, we gave everyone their own copy. We had a handful, but people started fighting over them over review time. And then it was always like, who took my FYI book? And then Dave was on vacation, so I stole his out of his bookcase because I couldn't find mine. But these books are helpful because as your managers coach people, it gives them real specific information. And again, what I love about them, each competency is 3 or 4 pages. It's not a whole big book, so it's quick and dirty. You can open up to it, focus on it. And it's really effective when you're coaching people, because if you want to talk about a particular competency, right before the one-on-one, I kind of reread through that or refresh my memory on it. And it helps me describe. Sometimes I'll photocopy just that competency for someone, but it's a very effective tool. And we use that book for that reason. So going through the exercise, these were the 10 competencies that we came up with. We fought a little bit or argued a bit about this one, values, personal values. And it was in, and then it was off. And it was in, then it was off. And we chose to keep it in there for 2 reasons. It came up high in that list. It's always done that honesty was important. And quite honestly, for our organization, this had been a problem. There had been so much discord and infighting and office shenanigans, if you will, that I felt that it was important to say, you're expected to maintain high personal value. So we did keep that in there. And they're pretty basic ones. We felt our managers as leaders needed to have accountability, be good problem solvers and decision makers, have to have great functional expertise. If you're the network administration, or if you're the network manager, you got to know what a network is. Good personal values. You have to be collaborative. You had to have a leadership presence. IT is about influencing people to do things. And if your presence is such that you're unable to do that, we wanted to continue to grow that for people. You need to be a coach and a developer of your people. You need to be able to think strategically because we were trying to help the institution move forward. You needed to understand and manage to the business as well. It isn't just about the network, but it's about the academic gaming department. And how do you extend what you want to do in the network and all the pristine and security you want to have and still be able to partner effectively with the academic partners that have a different, perhaps, view. And they had to be able to lead change and get comfortable with it. What we found as we did this is they fell into 3 sort of buckets. That some of those were about leading yourself, whether you were a manager or not. Personal values was about leading yourself. Accountability, problem solving. And then we saw a couple that were about leading other people. And then we saw about more leading the organization. So based on those sub-buckets, this is kind of what we came up with. Was that you're kind of in the center, and we also wanted this model to be extendable to our employees. This is not just about managers, it's about leadership. It just so happens at RIT, we're going to ask our IT managers to also ensure that they're leaders. So under leading self were those 4 competencies. So you could be an individual contributor, and those would be the competencies associated with being an effective person leading yourself, because you cannot be an effective leader of others if you can't manage or lead yourself. The second was leading others. This was an area that was kind of missing in my organization as an expectation. One of the managers said to me, all I thought about was this. I got hired to do my job because I know storage. And I manage other people who manage storage. But I didn't think about all these other things. I didn't think that I had to coach them or develop them, particularly in soft skills. I'd send them to technical training, and hey, no one taught me, is what somebody said. You know, nobody taught me, and I walked to school in cardboard shoes. But that was an area for my group that was really an eye-opener. And then the other was sort of, how do you lead the bigger organization? How do you think about the network organization or the data center, but understand how does that fit across all of ITS? And what's the impact on the other groups? And that last part's about changing the culture in ITS. That's really hard. So we looked at this as a means to give our managers a sheet of paper that said, effective this date, we expect this. Starting now, so everybody knows, this is how we want managers to be. These are the competencies we expect you to have in your job. Now, know that some of our managers didn't sign up for this. Some of them didn't have the skills, some of them didn't have the interest. And others very much had the interest, or they had the skills somewhere else. One of my managers, a director, said to me, you know, I learned all this 10 years ago somewhere else. But it's like a muscle you haven't used all those years, and it's painful to kind of get back into it. This is the only real handout I have. I made about 20 copies of the wheel that underneath each competency are the sub-competencies that describe the competency a little bit more fully. So for example, when I pass this around, you'll see under functional expertise, it used to say know your job, know the industry, content knowledge. We added manages resources, because that was another kind of a lightning or a light bulb for our managers, is their job was to manage their resources on projects. So we added that within here. So I'm going to pass this around. If you want one, feel free to take one. If not, that's fine. That's the only real handout. So those three dimensions or three aspects too, we felt was a way to help people remember things. It's about, these are the things about leading myself, these are the things about leading others, and this is that more global leadership. And every time you start a new role, you cycle back through that to some degree. So how do we drive these expectations home? We said we want everybody to aspire to competency in these competencies. But it wasn't going to be an overnight. We were going to give everybody 2 years to get there. Because we were raising the bar. We were describing where the bar was, but we had to help people get there. We did have a couple of people opt out, a couple of people we opted them out for them. But for the most part, the majority of our managers dug into these things, and the expectation is that they would be competent in most of them. That you couldn't be not competent in most of them. You could have one or two you weren't totally competent in, but that in order to maintain their role, and they weren't going to be part of their annual performance review, but I put on there yet, because we felt we really wanted to give people the chance to transition to this and not feel steamrolled into it without a chance to acquire the skills. We did share all this with our employees as well, so that they could know, expect this from your managers. And the paper wheel that you see is something that you see hanging up in our managers' offices to remind themselves that this is the stuff, I'm kind of on the hook for this. We clarified what the competencies were. We described what they look like. We did an informal assessment. We took the competencies and we said to everyone, this will be anonymous. Score yourself on the wheel. And what was interesting to me was the organization early on with very little training scored themselves above average in leading self, somewhat above average in leading others, and average or below average in leading ITS. Now, I was a little surprised because I would have, if I was scoring them, I would have scored them as definitely average, some of them above average in leading self, below average in leading others, and definitely below average in leading the organization. So we had a gap in our assessment, and that's the next thing that's important to remember. You can set the expectation, but then you have to qualify for people what is the level of what you expect them to be, and what does success look like in there, because the majority of them saw themselves as very competent in those areas. And the one that concerned me the most was the leading others, because that, to me, I saw that was our biggest bang for the buck, that if I could strengthen 20 people's ability to lead others, that would be a huge win across the whole organization. So we did this informal assessment, and then we kind of called it up to a group assessment. We told them share their informal one-on-one with their managers. I gave them a little bit of feedback some months later about it, not right then. And we began really some training and support. Our goal was to take these competencies and over the next year train them on them through one-on-ones, through managers' meetings, et cetera. But they very much were expectations. So the next step was self-awareness. And the reason being is they often are not aware of how others perceive them. Most of us perceive ourselves as we'd like to be. I know I do. We wanted to have some feedback from others. We looked at some peer coaching where they would help each other on these various competencies, did some training, and worked with them on development plans. How many people in this room have taken DISC? Okay, a handful. Okay, great. The first thing we did, because also to some degree IT people can be suspicious with tests and online assessments and don't label me kind of thing. So we wanted to proceed with caution. And the first tool we did was DISC, D-I-S-C. And DISC has been around since 1945. The gentleman who developed the original DISC, although it's been modified over the years, he never copyrighted it, which, too bad. But it's a wonderful tool, and what's great about DISC, and I'm going to pass out a DISC sample report. These are just samples, so you can, here, I keep missing you here. I'll start one with you, and you pass maybe over to that way. But this is a sample report, and basically DISC is a personal assessment tool. If I want to know what my DISC is, I take the test myself. I describe myself. There is no right answer, no wrong answer. It's behavioral based. Over 40 million people have taken it. And the purpose of DISC is to help you understand your own behavioral style. We all have a style. We all have a combination of styles. And what DISC does is you answer all these questions. It's a highly validated, reliable assessment tool, and it spits out a report about you. And if you go through the report, there's always a sentence or two that ticks you off when they say that about you. But often when people say, oh, that's not me, most people will tell you, yeah, that's me. I always say to them, go home, give it to your wife or your husband, and they'll tell you, oh, yeah, that's you. You are bossy. Yes, you are. So it helps you understand not only your behavioral style, but then how to even identify the behavioral styles of someone else. Even if you don't know their DISC, going through DISC training helps you start to think about that. And it isn't, for most of our managers, it's like, I'd be a great manager if only my people didn't stink so much. Or I would be a better manager with that manager if only he would change. DISC teaches you, based on your styles and your characteristics, how do you get what you need? How do you get what you need from people knowing how to use your style? And it will help you identify that behavioral style of others and it improves productivity, teamwork, and communication. Because if everyone in this room took the disc and we divided everybody up and said, all right, all the D's go over here, all the I's go over there, all the S's and all the C's, we'd make generalizations about each other. And we'd laugh, but what we'd be doing is we'd be instilling a common language and lingo that makes it okay to have the style you have. Because we all have a piece of each of those styles. We all have D, I, S, and C in us. Sometimes you're high in an area. I'm a high I, go figure. And someone might have a lower I, but you have some I. And what this basically does is it shows you where you fall in this DISC, and based on that, what might you want to do. It's non-judgmental, it's self-scored, and it allows you to talk about behavioral differences. My staff, I'm a high I, they know when they come in to see me, they always chit-chat a little bit, because we I's like that. We like the sociable part. How's your daughter? How's the conference? And then we can get to business. But with a high D, you're maybe going to go straight to business. It helps the individuals and it helps the team. And one of the things I love about DISC is DISC talks about we all bring a unique value, because you don't want a whole bunch of I's all doing one project, because the work won't get done. We'd like to chit-chat, right? Or you must be an I. She's laughing at me. So it kind of allows you to have those kinds of discussions. So this is DISC defined. These are the kind of characteristics. And everyone has a primary and a secondary and a tertiary. And you often have blended styles. And once you take this, you have people starting to say things like, yeah, I'm a high I, a little bit of D. I got no C, though. And those kinds of conversations become of interest to other people. And it's one of the things I'll share with you as we did this with our staff. So this allows you to say, how do you work with D's? How do you work with I's? What happens when an I is under pressure or stressed? How would you know? And this kind of gives you a little bit of a snapshot. And there's tons and tons and tons of DISC information all over the internet. So this is just a little sample. But dominance, the D, high Ds have a high ego strength. They get things done quickly. They seek change. They want to win. They want direct answers. If there was a sign hanging over the head of a D, especially a high D, be brief, be bright, be gone. Influence, I, people-oriented, they share feeling, they like to be liked, they're optimistic, they're verbal. This morning I opened up my refrigerator in my little hotel. I had put a couple of apples in there, and they were frozen. It was a crummy little refrigerator. But I'm an I, I'm optimistic, and I thought, frozen apple. I've got bags under my eyes. I'll rest with the 2 frozen apples on my eyes till we had to leave. So I laughed. I thought, that's the I in me. C's are compliant. They follow rules. They watch people. They value work. They ask careful questions, and they are motivated to be accurate. I have a C who works for me who is not here today, but one of the things he said to me is this freed him up to say, I'd like more time to think about this. I'm a C. Whereas before, it worried him because I'm also a high D. I was always asking him, what about this, what about this, what about that, what about that, what about that? And he felt compelled to answer me. But he wasn't comfortable in that. He liked to check his facts. He liked to be accurate. He wants more time to think. S's are steadiness. They're loyal. They're predictable. They're well organized. They create stability. They're motivated by safety, and they make changes carefully. And when you start to understand what motivates other people, you win. So, a D. A chair of a department asked me about a senior level person at our institution who's a big D. I think it must be all D. Be brief, be bright, be gone. So this chair said to me, I can't ever get him to answer me or respond to me. And this guy's a big fat I. He's an off-the-charts I. When I get an email from the chair, it's like filled with a million things. And somewhere in there is a request. I have to read the whole, how you doing, blah, blah, blah. So I said to him, you need to send the email. In the subject line, say, action required, all caps, colon, and put the one word, budget. And then say, can I do X, Y, Z, question mark, please advise. Don't sign your name, don't say hello, Don't ask him how he's doing. He's like, but that's so rude. I said, be brief, be bright, be gone. When a D asks an I, how you doing? They just want the I to say, fine. They don't want to know. And an I will be crushed if you're terse with them in an email. They think you're mad at them. I sent an email to an I in my organization, who's also not here, and said, do it, exclamation point. And he said, oh, are you, no, I'm not mad, I'm saying do it, just do it, yes. So now I always say, hi, smiley face, and he feels better. And he's pretty high on the S as well, so safety is important to him. If he thinks I'm mad at him, he's worrying all night, and I'm actually just, my old thumbs hurt texting so much at night, and I'm like, just do it, period. I didn't say hi, nothing. So this is very advantageous as it relates to that. How did we use DISC? So we did it first for the managers. And we gave everybody a little overview. Everybody saw a sample report. We did a debrief. And we had, out of 20-something people, only one person was kind of miffed. There was a sentence in hers she didn't like, and it said, stay 5 feet away from this person when delivering bad news. And she viewed it as an interpretation of violence. They were basically saying that they're not touchy-feely. But for the most part, everybody really liked them. We did some peer discussions. We broke them up into some groups. One-on-one discussion. There's a ton of training and training games and opportunities and cute tchotchkes. You can buy little magnets and people stick them on their doors. I'm a D, I'm an I, that type of thing. We did them into department and team meetings. We try to weave them into meetings and discussions. And really the purpose of it isn't the tool, it's what the tool does. It allows a C to tell a D, I'd like to think some more, by the way, I'm a C. And that allows people to have this common language and rejoice in the fact that every one of us, our value is valuable to the team. It's not bad to be an S or a C or a D or an I. It's who you are. It's knowing who you are. And if you're extreme in any of those, how do you temper that? We did the managers first, but then we did our entire division, and we made it optional. We did it at a town hall. Every single person took it. Every single person showed up at the town hall. I had never seen my folks as engaged on a topic, and we have a town hall every other month, as they were on DISC. It was a bit surprising to me because I had this thought in my mind that IT people wouldn't have been as engaged to do that, but they were. And one of the great things was the woman who did our training divided us into 4 groups and stuck all the D's over here, the I's, the S's, and the C's, and went through all the attributes and pluses and minuses, and people were really engaged. And there was this exercise that was fantastic that she had us do. She had each letter pretend they were another letter and describe how that letter would pack for a trip to Vegas. Well, I never laughed so hard. The D's making fun of the I's and the S's and the C's, and it was really a real fun time. And people were engaged. They viewed it positively. I don't think we had many people take it as a negative type of thing. And we are actually going to do DISC Part 2 this August. I believe we did Part 1 a few months ago, 3 or 4 months ago, and then in August we wanted to about every 6 months bring the group back and give them a new tchotchke or talk to them a little bit more about it. Some of our buildings, when I walk through the hallways, you see DISC signs on a door. One says, Cranky D, enter at your own risk. And I think people are embracing that. So that starts with you. That's you being aware of yourself. That's what I think about me, because I scored that about me. The next thing we wanted to do was broaden your self-awareness. Because now, what do you think about me? And how do I broaden my awareness about myself based on the view of others? And we use something called the Leadership Challenge. And I love this whole concept and these practices. The authors are Kouzes and Posner. They've identified 5 practices of what they think is great leadership. And it's based on millions of people, millions of successful leaders. And basically they say great leaders demonstrate these things, these 30 things, a lot. And it's also behavioral based. And they also have a leadership profile inventory, so you can say, hey, great leader, if you're practicing all these things, here's an inventory others can take and tell you how well they think you're doing on these things. So the LPI is sort of the assessment tool that you can use if you decide to embrace these practices. Over the last day and a half, we heard 3 leadership experts talk about leadership, about what should the leadership CIOs embrace, what competencies should people look for, what are the things that are important, and every single one of them mapped back to Casares and Posner. And as I sat through the other sessions, I kept my little list looking. Because you're going to see within these 5 practices, there isn't anything that you'd say, no, I disagree with practice 3. Yeah, that one's a bad one. So we chose this one as a tool to broaden that type of a self-awareness. And one of the things I like about Jim Casares and Barry Posner is they really have taken leadership down to a level of understanding that it's about the people who are in your organizations. It's not about you. And that leadership is an art of mobilizing others who want to struggle for shared aspirations. And I think that all of their work points to this. I'm going to also pass their book around so you can take a look. And I definitely want all my books back. But this is one of their sort of basic books, and they have a ton of books out there. So here's the leadership challenge. And they have 5 practices, they call them. And I really love that term because they're saying this is stuff you should do and you really ought to practice it. You should do it a lot. And as I look at these leadership practices from Casares and Posner, the leadership challenge ones, if you were to view my 10 competencies as vertical lines, these practices stripe across them. Okay? So modeling the way cuts across all my competencies. Inspiring a shared vision cuts across all the competencies that RIT has developed for their managers. So what is the LPI? That's the tool. It's 30 behavioral-based statements. So I said there's 5 practices. Underneath each practice is 6 questions. It's very strong reliability and validity. Over 250,000 leaders have taken it and over 1 million observers, and that was a 1.5-year old data. It takes about 10 or 20 minutes to complete. You can take it online or on paper, and the results are electronic, and you get a report back pretty quickly. I'm going to pass around an LPI sample report. And one of the things that I'm going to bring your attention to is it talks about each of those competencies. And in this, you take a self-assessment, your direct reports take an assessment of you, your manager takes an assessment of you, and a few other people if you choose to have some others. And what it gives you is, where's your competency in these areas based on how you view it, how your direct reports view it, and how your boss views it. And really the only one who's not anonymous is your boss. Everybody else is anonymous. And that's very enlightening for managers. Because I might think I'm really strong at enabling others, but if my direct reports don't score me in the same manner I am scoring myself, there's a discussion there, or something you should think about. So it's very helpful. And then one of the things I love about this tool is there's a page in here that takes all 30 competencies, or all 30 questions, and it rank stacks them. It's usually about the 3rd page. It looks like this. I'm going to pass this report around. And it tells you all the ones up top you're really high at. And they're very specific practices. It says, shows others how their interests can be realized. Treats people with dignity and respect. Actively listens to diverse points of view. It's very actionable. It's very behavioral. It's not so theoretical that you're not sure what people want. One of my managers said to me, he just ripped this out of his report and he hung it up in front of where he sits so he can read it every day and say, I gotta be doing more of this. The stuff that's at the bottom, I just have to do more of, like this one here says, paints a big picture of the group aspirations. So he's looking at that to say, maybe once a month at a staff meeting, I need to say, let's paint a big picture of what we aspire to. Because what this study says is these things on this page are what great leaders do a lot of. So I'm going to pass around some sample reports. And these are all online, too, if you want to take one of these. Thanks. So now the staff is armed. You have your disc about your personal style. And now you have this feedback. And in these, underneath each of the practices are really two slightly different focus areas that feed into that practice. So model the way is really about finding your voice by clarifying your personal values. Or setting the example by aligning actions with shared values. And it breaks it down into very specific behaviors. And if you think about a lot of the things that we learned over the last couple of days from the other leadership presentations, they talk a lot about modeling the way. One of the things I loved about Jennifer's book was on page 115, the 20 steps towards trans leadership. Speaks to all of these. Different words, different way to approach it maybe, but in essence it's the same. So as you go through your book, that list on page 115 is very helpful. So modeling the way is really doing what you say you will do and building commitment to action. Inspiring a shared vision. When they train this, they'll often talk to you about great inspirational leaders like Martin Luther King that talk in such a way that you envision a different future. And this is about using exciting and imaginative ways to talk about possibilities. And then enlisting other people to help you get there. Challenge the process. I think this is an interesting one because people also think it's to be challenging. It isn't just to challenge or be challenging. It's about finding a new way to do things. How do you change the status quo? That's, I think, in higher ed, an important one because we have a lot of sacred cows. And it's difficult. I think often I hear from managers in IT, well, that's just how it's always been, so up till now. This is about possibilities thinking, and it ties into inspiring a shared vision. So challenging the process is about taking risks and looking for new ways to do things. First time I did the LPI was before I came to RIT. And in our group, they paired us up in peer leadership. And I was high on challenge the process. And I was paired up with someone who was high in manage from the heart. And I'll show you that one in a second. And we spent a lot of time talking about what did we each do behaviorally. And it was very valuable for me to be coached by someone in an area that I didn't have that strength and to really have that person coach me based on my style. And that was something I was always very grateful for. Fourth one is enabling others to act, fostering collaboration by promoting cooperative goals, building trust, and strengthen other people by sharing power. And this is really important because leadership is all about trust. If you don't trust your leader, then you're not going to follow them. And if people aren't following you, you're not really a leader. I heard something years ago that I thought was great. If you want to know how good of a leader you are, is turn around and see who's following you. And if it's nobody, then you're really not doing a great job. And it is about trust. And if there's one thing that I would say, if you only have time to think or do one thing, is to ensure that you're doing what you say and that people trust you and that you're putting forth the energy in that arena or it doesn't matter if it's a peer or a direct report or somewhere else, but that to me is one area that is, if you don't have that, is very difficult to do everything else. Not impossible, but it's difficult. And then last but not least is encourage the heart. And that is recognizing contributions by others. That's about celebrating the group and the team. And this was the area that was always in my LPI was my lowest. It wasn't in a bad range, because you'll see in that chart, you could be in the bottom or the middle or the top. But it was the last practice I practiced. My feeling was we squared up every 2 weeks, right? You got a paycheck, you did work. I wasn't a big kudos or thank you person. And this person that they paired me with, he was. And he said to me, you're very structured and you need to find a way to encourage the heart that fits you. And this is years ago, and he said to me, you should plan in your calendar that you'll write a thank you note every week to someone. So I was like, okay. So my first week I sat there holding my pen and he said, go out and buy a package of thank you cards and just every Friday do one. And I'm telling you, the first week or two I was kind of thinking, who can I thank? And now I find it comes to me so much more naturally. And I look forward to it, and I feel really good about doing that. And it's something that has stuck with me all these years because of that one suggestion he made, because he was really good at this. Not that he wrote thank you cards, because he walked around his branch all day long, talking to people, thanking them, and that just wasn't gonna fit with my style, but he gave me a good tip on something that would. What I really like about Encourage the Heart, it's about celebrating your values and your victories and trying to create a spirit of community, which in my organization was hard. We're over 100 people, we're scattered across 4 buildings, and my folks kept saying, in order to unify IT, we have to be brought to the same building. That's not gonna happen. So we try to find other ways to unify IT, to celebrate things. And this is an area that I think has really been, probably for me, the most rewarding to watch, because in the beginning, things like an anniversary, we didn't celebrate those. And we had a lot of highly tenured people in the organization. And there was this initial thought when I came in that I'm gonna be bringing all my pals in from somewhere else and replacing the whole kit and caboodle. And I really wanted to make sure that people got the message that I really wanted to celebrate the people who had had this tenure. So we started doing these anniversaries, and in the beginning, people say, I don't want my name mentioned, I'm not gonna walk up to the front of the room. And we had the same blueprint. You could speak, you could at a town hall, and bit by bit over the last year, we are seeing people step up to the front of the room. And some of them are people that would, in a million years, I would have never bet money, would get up in front of the entire IT division, and after their manager gave them their anniversary award in front of everyone, speak for a few moments. And that is, for me, a very rewarding experience, because it isn't for me and my leadership team to create a spirit of community, it's for them, and they're doing it. And that's, I think, very rewarding. So the 360 was the LPI. That's the tool you're seeing here. You take it by yourself, all your directs, your managers, and others. It indicates the frequency of a stated behavior. So if someone never sees you do it, they have to write, I don't see them. They can't say, well, I imagine Jennifer must do this. Creates a report. It delivers the results by the practice, overall, some things specific to the respondents in the overview. We did not use this as part of the annual review process on purpose. We did it intentionally separate. And we used it, though, for feedback, a development plan, and some peer coaching exercises. And we asked people to really use this as well as we trained on those practices. So the LPI and the Leadership Challenge was a way to sort of now broaden what we were doing. So currently we have in place expectations around those competencies and the practices. We've defined them. We've made people self-aware of the style and behaviors that they are using and incorporating. We've gotten some feedback from others. They have a development plan, and we're looking for that continuous self-improvement, because leadership development's a journey. It's never over. One of the things I like about the LPI, there's 5 practices. Every time you take it, one will be the 5th practice. You can never be, it doesn't go that you're in all of them at this number. The numbers get better, they get closer together, they move up to the upper third of the chart, but there'll always be one that you'll practice less. And what's interesting to me is I'm watching some of my managers mature in this thought process, saying, this year I'm going to be doing a lot of new changes, so I really need to inspire more than I need to enable others. Because quite honestly, I'm not going to be able to let people do whatever they want. I need to inspire a new future, so I'm going to pay attention to those behaviors. It's not his bottom practice, but it's a middle practice, but it's one he needs to strengthen for this upcoming year, because that's what they're going to be doing. So that, to me, is a maturity in that manager to use this as a tool. And that's all it is how do you use those things. So now, how do we tie this together? There's another tool that we use. There's a couple of other things that we've done. There is a book I'm going to pass around by Stephen Covey called Crucial Conversations. This is a great book. To me, coming from industry into higher ed, probably the biggest thing I noticed that's different is we're very collegial in higher ed. But I don't think we reconcile differences. We sort of agree to disagree. And we're very polite about it, but then we go out in the hallway and say, well, that's hooey. I'm not doing that. I'm doing this. And we never quite finish the conversation. We do a lot of compromise, which for me is chocolate mashed potatoes. I want chocolate, you want potatoes. Neither tastes good when you make chocolate mashed potatoes. So Crucial Conversations is a great book. We've used this for some of our departments, some that were having problems, others that just needed this skill, like in our project management office. Chris trained her project managers on Crucial Conversations. And the bottom line of this book is when stakes are high and emotions are high, you need to have a crucial conversation. This also presents a great lingo into the organization where you kind of might say to someone, we need to have a crucial conversation. Is Tuesday good for you? Because I really want to dig into something. But this is a great book. It also has tapes and discs. You see how old I am, tapes, discs available for it. But Crucial Conversations is another great tool to get people working effectively together. And then this is the other thing that we're doing. So now we've taken our managers, we've given them expectations, we've given them training, we've given them tools to assess themselves, we've given them the time and the opportunity to say, how are you developing? What can we do to help you? What can you read? What can we train you on? How are your interactions with your people going? And then at a senior leadership level, here's where we're kind of culminating it all. It's something, it's called a 9-box exercise. And you can do this for a ton of things. The two aspects that we're choosing to measure is on the bottom is, what is the competency demonstrated in the current role? So Joe's our network manager, and how competent is he as the network manager? With 1A being the lowest, 3A being the highest of competency. And then on the left axis, you have their leadership ability demonstrated. Not potential, demonstrated. And with 1A being the lowest and 1C being the highest. Now, this is typically a tool used for succession planning. That's not what we're using it for, but it's a good way to have that discussion. Because ideally, 3C is what's called your high potentials. Or hypos, which I think is a cool word. And your folks that are 2Cs or 2Bs or 3Bs are close to being high potentials. And what are you doing to move them here? And this is where you also have some discussion. So Mary Smith's a brand new manager for us. She's been with us 6 months. You start with a list of all your managers, how many months they've been in their current assignment. Mary Smith's been with us 6 months. She seems to be doing a good job. She's an app dev manager. She seems to be an okay leader, but we've only seen her for 6 months, so she's right here. Her name is in 1A. But it should be in 1A. And then we have Mary Jones, who's been with us 10 years. She's pretty competent, maybe put her at 2A, but she still hasn't, and she's been with us a long time, and she's been stuck here. We need to make some decisions about that. Is that okay? We have a person in our organization here who we know will never go up higher, but we're okay with that for the role that this person's in. There is no right or wrong. It doesn't mean everybody's a 3C, because quite honestly, you don't have enough positions to have everybody be a 3C, but nor do you want the bulk of your organization here. So what this gives us is an opportunity to sit down and come into a meeting. There's just 3 or 4 of us. It's a highly confidential meeting. We don't share this information with our managers. But it's for us to come up with a shared view on how are people doing in this leadership journey. So if I manage the network manager and I come into this and I say, oh, my network manager is very competent and he's a really good leader, he's a 3B. And then the other 3 senior leaders say, he might be okay here, but boy, I think he's a 3A. Or I actually see he's a 2A. As his manager, that's an interesting discussion because I've kind of haloed him a bit. He doesn't give me any trouble, he gets the job done. But what I'm finding out is he's a pain in the neck for the other side of the house to work with. So we use this as a way to come up with a shared view, and then as a way to say, what are we doing to help these folks? The people who are in 1A, we're okay with that, they're new, okay, fine. We want to make sure that we're mentoring them to develop both their leadership and their technical ability. And then if we have people here or here, we look at development plans to say, what are we doing to bring them to the next level? And I'm a firm believer in succession planning, even insofar as if we have to find someone here who's be great director material or associate CIO material, and if I don't have a position, maybe you do. Maybe you do. And if you look at that article from the Higher Ed Chronicle, that's what they talk about. In order to get ahead in higher ed, most people leave the institution to get to the next level. So you should be, to some degree, the triple bang in all of this is you're growing your own leadership. You're instilling in them the platform and the foundations of what you want leaders in your organization to have. So this was a tool that we use. And the first time we all meet, we kind of have different expectations around it. And we did it in my team, just my executive leadership team, and now we're doing it with our directors about all of the managers. We're kind of calling this the year of the manager. They've had their 2 years to kind of get, it's about as much training as we could really do. We've got the expectations out there, they've got support, they've got guides for this. Now we have to decide, do we have the right people in the seats? And I think we do. In most instances, we really do, because people either self-select out or they get better, or they turn that aspect of their skill set on that they had from before. And most of our managers, I think, are doing quite well in this. But this was an area that we really kind of culminates all of that for us. So what's next in the journey for us? The top ones, you can't really tell. The bottom 4 are bold. The top ones we've done. We've set the expectations. If you were to have a roadmap, I would tell you, make sure you set expectations. Make sure you define what are the 1 to 10 competencies you want people to have. Make sure people have a self-awareness of their style and behaviors. Make sure you get feedback from others. You don't have to do the LPI. This is just a tool we picked. Make sure you do some kind of training. Make sure you consider refreshers. You know, people get tired of the training jargon of the day, and but it is important to kind of weave it back in. That's why we thought, let's pick 1 or 2 or 3 things and stick with them for a while. Make sure there's a development plan, and make sure you put the expectation of continual self-improvement in it. You know, the lucky manager who drew my name to do peer coaching with the LPI, he's done an outstanding job because he's not letting me off the hook on a couple of things. And he's really doing, some of his peer managers have been like, that must be horrible. And he's like, I don't know what he actually says to them. Who knows what he's telling me. But he's really doing a great job with that, and it's been very helpful for me. So where are we going? We're kind of doing DISC Part 3, which is our entire division, the refresher. We're going to take DISC down to blended styles. So you might be a high D, but then you're also a high S. What does that mean? And we're going to take it to the next level. And it's interesting because I've gotten 3 or 4 emails from employees saying, will there be a makeup for that refresher? I'm on vacation that week. My family always rents a place, and I can't get out of it. And so they seem to be pretty engaged on the DISC. We're going to repeat the LPI refresher. We're going to refresh the Leadership Challenge 5 practices, and the managers are going to teach that. I have a group of 5 of them that are each going to co-teach kind of it back to the group, kind of remind people, a little bit of a refresher. And I would like to repeat the LPI. We're just trying to figure out timing. We're changing our review process, and that kind of got tied up in that a bit. And this fiscal year, it was very of a light bulb moment for me to think about where was there an opportunity. And we were redoing our employee evaluations in IT. They were this really weird form. Our HR department is pretty, hey, do whatever you want to do. So we had charged a committee, a cross-functional team across all of IT, and they were going to get together. And originally we charged them with come up with a couple of approaches, present it to the managers, present it to the senior leadership, and we'll make a decision. And we thought, wow, what a great opportunity to give away power. It wasn't our review. It wasn't going to be the manager's review. So we went back to that team and said, guess what? We're going to change your charge. They'd only met once. We said, now the charge is different. You are to find a review process that you think fits and works and implement it. Well, what about the approval? If you guys think it's good, we think it's good. It was interesting. Half the team was like, what is this? It sounds like like you're trying to do something. There's a trick in here. But it was really about the illumination of that point. Where can we share power? And the team did an awesome job. They came up with a great review process. It probably would not have been one if you said to me, here's a piece of paper and a pencil, Jeanne, think of something for your area. And I have a background in HR, so I actually would have been a good candidate to write one. I would have never come up with what they came up with. And they came up with a different approach. It's much more frequent. It's much leaner. And we've just recently implemented it, so I can report back to you at another time how well it's working. But it was very, very empowering to give that power to them. And they did a fantastic job with it. So that was something that the leadership challenge does challenge you all the time to be a better leader. No matter how many times you've trained in it, no matter how many times you've read the book. I follow them on Facebook, and every day there's another little, or on Twitter, and they'll tweet something. And I can't ever say I'm finished in understanding. So how are we doing overall at IT? I think better. Again, I'm an optimist, so that's where I'm naturally going to go. Are we done? No. Our employees are definitely more satisfied with our managers. I have a breakfast every other week. 5 or 6 employees from across the organization. We chit-chat. Started it a couple years ago just to get to know them, but I've continued it because it's been a great way for me to get a temperature read on what's going on, and the conversations have dramatically moved. The first year was complaints about their managers, complaints about the process, and now their complaints are good ones. How are we going to effectively manage international support desks? And they have these great, we need more money for this. They have really good complaints. I think our managers are stronger leaders. It has been overwhelming for some of them. It's a lot. It's a lot of work. I can show you a fast report, but then you have to do something with it. Now, sometimes just a self-awareness on it is enough to start the improvement, but we have a couple of managers, if they were here, would tell you it's too much work. It's a lot of work. Although there's others who will tell you it's been very beneficial for them. But I will say it's hard to fit it in. We have a monthly managers meeting where we're trying to infuse some of that with the training, and that is something that can be overwhelming. They're busy. They have a lot to do, and I think for sometimes this can be a bit overwhelming. We definitely have increased satisfaction from our business partners. And just having expectations around managers' behaviors often cleans up a lot of silly things that you'd be working to try to make better. So the feedback that I get from the groups we work with, our colleges have a little bit of IT sprinkled in them, right? And I thought, we're making progress. When an essay from one of the colleges said, 3 years ago, if you told me I had to work for ITS, I would have killed myself. Now I don't know if it would suck so bad. And I thought, that's progress. So, thank you. We've moved to being sought out as partners. And I think, to me, that's the proof is in the pudding there. And I would say that's because we have 24 managers now who are working with more air. They're working more effectively. They're getting more out of their people. They're better managers, and I think because of it, our employees are better. This whole leadership program is focusing on how we work, not just the work. It's about the culture. It's about how people treat each other. It's about respect. And we've quickly been able to extinguish a lot of the really negative behavior that we had before. And the DISC, the LPI, crucial conversations are part of our lingo. And I think that that helps people to say, it's okay to have a tough discussion. It's okay to have the stakes be high and emotions be high. You can disagree, you just can't be disagreeable. And it's those kinds of things that I think has helped our organization. So, lessons learned from us if you're going to do something like this. Break it down. Break it into pieces, make a model, a roadmap, keep it simple. Do the easy parts first. And some of that is just the expectations and getting a basic kind of tool. Make sure you make it a journey and make sure you live it. One of the reasons why I love the whole leadership journey and why I want so much to take any opportunity to teach it is because then I learn from it. And the best way, if you're sitting there thinking, well, I didn't have all those experiences and I might not be the right person to do it, you're absolutely the right person to do it. Because if you teach it, you will learn it. And as you learn it and you work with particularly emerging leaders, you'll be shocked at how much you will learn from them. So I really don't want anyone to feel like you have to have any kind of background or special interest in this. They want to hear it, and they want to hear it from you. So great resources. You already know I love the DISC, love Leadership Challenge, love the book, love the concept. They do conferences. He's on Facebook. You can follow him on Twitter, all kinds of things. Another great book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There by Marshall Goldsmith. Talks about all the skills you use to progress your career. As you move up, change. And the skills that got you to where you are today will not get you to the next level. And this has been very helpful, this book, for me in coaching other people, as well as for myself. It encourages you to put more tools in your tool bag. Obviously, the FYI book, Crucial Conversations, is fantastic. Another great book, It's Your Ship by Mike Abrashoff. He is a Naval Academy grad who put a lot of great efficiency into the Navy through his leadership model. And his mantra is, it's your ship, steer it. And if you like that no-nonsense approach to leadership, which I kind of do, he's a great author. He's also a wonderful speaker. Main book, 7 Habits, is a fantastic book. Another great book is The 4-Hour Workweek. It's a little bit out there, but it's a great, it really makes you think. I like that book. A lot of stuff on Facebook and Twitter. I use my Twitter account to feed me all sorts of great articles and interesting things, so feel free. If you want to follow me on Twitter so you can find out what I'm following, I'm JCRIT. So Jeanne Casares, RIT. And you can pick up all the stuff I follow. I saw the woman from IBM. CIOleadershipcenter.com is a fantastic resource, some good stuff on there. So is LinkedIn, I don't have that on there. And then the leadershipchallenge.com is a great website, and I get a lot from that as well. And there's a million other great things out there. I also love this, John Maxwell's 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. If you haven't guessed by now, I like charts, lists, numbered things. And my favorite one in here is the law of the lid, which says if your leadership, we all have a leadership number of 1 to 10. 10, you're a spectacular leader. 1, you're not so great. And if your lid's a 5, as a leader, you're only going to get 4s and below to work for you, because another 5 wants to work for a 6. And the law of the lid says you will never hire people in greater than the leadership you have at your front line. And so his book's fantastic as well, so I encourage you to take a look at that. And again, I particularly love Law of the Lid.